Hi, I'm Steve Kane. I'm a psychologist and a professor from California, and I am so grateful that you're joining me today. We live in an attention economy, and everybody is short on time. So I'm grateful that you're here, and I think I have some information that might be useful to you. Um, I, um, I wanted to give you a little bit of background about why I'm so glad to be here, and I'll begin with a short and quick story. About 12 years ago, I was driving home from work, and I started to feel sick. And as I was driving, I had the profound sensation that I was having a heart attack. I thought to myself, this is really serious. So I drove to the local emergency department, and I spent 6 hours undergoing testing and so forth. And the doctor came out, long story short, and the doctor said to me, I have some good news for you, and I have some bad news for you. And the doctor said, the good news is you're not having a heart attack and you're fine. But the doctor said the bad news is that you have leukemia, and it turns out that I had a and have a very complicated form of leukemia, and I'm a proud survivor of 12 years of fighting cancer. So the whole reason I mention this is, even after earning a PhD, even after becoming a professor, and even after being a psychologist, I've worked with thousands of individuals. I think cancer has been my greatest teacher, and it's really focused my thinking about wellness. So, in this presentation, um, uh, you, the audience is there's so much other material, and most of you are familiar with the basics of wellness. Like, for instance, you should eat well, you should sleep well, and you should exercise well. So, I want to broaden the discussion and talk about some other ideas that I think will actually help you in your private life. So let's go to the slides. And the first thing I wanted to share with you, some of this may be a bit controversial, so I ask that you just have an open mind. And the my title about we live in an era of despair is, I thought, apropos given the state of the world, not just the pandemic and even beyond the sadness of war and famine and other things that most individuals, including privileged individuals in the first world. So, first of all, I wanted to talk about this issue about how loneliness and anxiety and depression are growing across the globe, not just in the first world, but also in collectivist societies that have traditionally been more supportive and have had less loneliness. So this is really worrisome. And by the way, there's 30 years of research that would back all of this up, that this was true prior to the pandemic. And then another idea that I want you to kind of just think about, and I actually share this with my students. In fact, I gave a 2-hour lecture on this, and I wish we had more time. But I want to introduce you to the idea of hypercapitalism, and essentially the bottom line is that the hypercapitalism, especially in North America, and I would say especially in the United States, is can best be summed up by saying it's all about profit and power over people. Um, some of these statistics, and I'm using the US, even though this is an international audience, because supposedly the US is the privileged first world nation. And I think in many ways that's not actually the case. Now, I'm not anti capitalist. I'm a psychologist who's worried about humans whose bodies are absorbing the stress of what our culture and what the world is doing. So the U.S. recently ranked 53rd across all nations in life expectancy, which is stunning, and it continues to drop in quality of life. And a quick side note and a shout out to Scandinavian, in particular Finland. For the last 5 years, Finland has been rated as one of the most high quality cultures in terms of satisfaction, contentment, and happiness. And it's the social democracies that tend to be flourishing. So I just think that's kind of something to think about. And then I think the other idea I'd like to impart to you, and I'm surprised at this, but my students are oftentimes shocked to. I use this in workshops with them, and I talk about how humans are actually very fragile social animals, social mammals, I should say, and they forget that completely forgotten that we're mammals and we're actually part of the earth. We're part of this world. We're not separate from it. We're of it, and we're profoundly fragile in so many ways. And there's so much more to say about this, but the time is limited. So the next thought, I think many of you feel this, is that humans were not built for this much uncertainty. We haven't. Evolution moves slowly, wisely but slowly, and we certainly we're not built for this level of change. And this would be true in the second and the third world as well. And so, one of my themes too is also self compassion. And I'm sure there are other presenters that will talk about this. And I'll come back to self compassion shortly. So, the other key thing I would like you to kind of just think about, and I'm just hoping to sort of plant seeds that will lead to your wellness. And you'll see in just a minute, very quickly, we're going to get very practical about how to help you be happier and maybe more content. So the challenge, though, is this all adds up to what I call sort of the ambient psychological background of our lives, is this unrecognized, often unrecognized feelings of anxiety, depression, but also disorientation. So many of the patients that I see actually are unable to verbalize everything I've just shared with you. So they oftentimes, first of all, blame their loneliness, their depression, their anxiety on themselves. Secondly, they look for a biological answer in the form of antidepressants. Antidepressants are very important. They can really help a lot of individuals, but I'm suggesting that this is not a pill solvable problem. So, to jump right in, I want to share some other thoughts with you that I think will really help. So, this idea about listen to your body and live close to the earth. This is sort of my personal mantra that really is drawn from a lot of indigenous wisdom and a lot of um, wisdom taken from um, First Nation wisdom. So this idea about listen to your body and live close to the earth, I think, is a powerful thought. And I want you to hold that in your mind as we go through a couple of these slides. So the first one, I think many of you have heard about being in nature as much as possible, and it's in your nature. In fact, many of you may have heard of a book some years ago called "The Last Child in the Woods: Nature Deficit Disorder." By Richard Louv, and it's an outstanding book. But it talks about how our bodies we're leaving our our fundamental connection to the earth behind, and that's why many of us sadly are blind to climate change. And you can't get to a forest. I understand. I've grown up in major cities, and but the idea would be to go to a park and just get outside and get away from screens. I know that this sounds basic, but it's critical. There is about 20 years of research that would back this up. Most individuals will say honestly, when they think about it, they are not actually getting enough outdoor time. And then this might prove a little bit controversial, but I have been experimenting with meditation for over 25 years. I have formal training in various forms of meditation. Meditation works; it's really important. But the traditional forms of meditation, the traditional forms of sitting meditation, where one simply focuses on the breath, oftentimes in the traditional Buddhist or Taoist traditions, which are beautiful traditions, by the way. But they don't work because clients, patients they don't stay with it. And so, in my practice and in some of the research literature, what does work is meditating in a different way daily, but something that's anchored in the body. So, this goes back to my idea about listening to your body. So, try guided meditation. And first of all, anchor your meditation laying down, usually with a headset so that you've got no noise. And I suggest, and I prescribe this to my own patients, and I give them a specific set of videos that they can use. But these are on YouTube. They're free and they're available all the time. But the important thing is this: is to engage in about 5 minutes of deep breathing to anchor your body first. By the way, there is some research that suggests that traditional forms of meditation centered only on breathing that are not guided sometimes do not help individuals who have trauma backgrounds. So this is a way of meditating that clients that maybe you could experiment with. Um, uh, and then after 5 minutes of being sort of brought back to your body to anchor your body, then engage in a guided 10 to 15-minute video, again, a YouTube video. There are plenty of them out there for about 10 to 15 minutes, and you can choose whatever topic your body feels drawn to. I don't work for them. I'm not collecting a commission from them. I wish I was, but the Daily Calm is one source. You know that there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of apps out there that are centered around meditation. But the Daily Calm folks have been kind enough to leave a lot of their videos up. And if you search for them quite easily. So 20 minutes a day, that's it. It doesn't have to be a complicated thing. So I worry that many individuals are prescribed multiple sessions of meditation each day. It's too difficult. They don't stay with it, and then they have a feeling of failure. I'd rather have them have a feeling of success. So something to think about. And if you want further information on that, email me, and I can give you specific suggestions. The key is to um, have that kind of experience so that you can also develop a sense of learning to say no so that your body doesn't have to. And I really want you to think about this. I see this in my patients, I've experienced this in myself. In many cultures, we're so driven. I'll get to that in just a few minutes. But this idea about you must be present to your body to sense your body's wisdom. And then you'll understand your own unique desires and vulnerabilities. The key is vulnerabilities. So you can take all kinds of workshops in stress reduction and so forth. But the key is, are you really listening to your body? And do you really understand what your body is saying that it needs for you? And in many cultures, this is really difficult to do. The next slide is also really important, but it's also backed by 30 years of research going back by a variety of different kinds of clinicians, researchers, and academics. And I can boil it down by this idea about love people, not work, and not money. So the research shows that individuals who pursue who are strivers, who are pursuing only money, the challenge is that they tend to experience actually even greater unhappiness. Um, does money matter? It absolutely matters, and the research shows that you need enough money to be roughly at the median of your particular culture, but increased amounts of earnings after that do not make you money. And I have to be honest with you, living in California, some of the most unhappy people that I've worked with have been multimillionaires who are completely disillusioned, and money does not solve their problems. Related to this, the research also says, and I think this is a prescription for North Americans in particular, The research shows that Americans in particular tend to be some of the loneliest people on the planet. And the research says to strive to have at least two close friends in addition to your partner. That's sort of the recipe for health and happiness and success. So think about that. Now, many of you, by the way, come from collectivist cultures where you're deeply rooted in friendship and support, and that's fantastic. The other thing would be know your 3 to 5 deepest authentic values and then live by them. And the shortest assessment, and I oftentimes ask my students this question is, can you share with me, tell me about like what were the 3 to 5 most important things you know about life and about living? And if you can journal a little bit about that, you'll discover what your authentic values are. You don't need a test. So, what are the 3 to 5 most important things you know about life and about living? And there will be answers there. Finally, this idea about social media taking over the world. I just have to tell you, I do research in this area. You do need to defend yourself against social media. If you want to sleep well at night, you should not doom scroll and you should not over focus on the news. I tell my own patients don't watch or don't consume media after 12 noon, and that tends to help them. Another scary thing, and this is a whole different lecture and a workshop, would be as it's starting to meld with artificial intelligence and augmented reality, we're not able to tell what's real. And this will be I think, terrifying over the next few years. I love technology, but I'm deeply concerned. So I want to leave you with one thought. I love this quote. It's an African proverb about when death finds you, may it find you alive. And I think that may be worth meditating on. And then finally, I'd like to leave you with the thought that when you think about this, the entire universe is a miracle. Planet Earth is a miracle and you're a miracle. The fact that we're here and that you have a body is something to be profoundly grateful for. Thank you for your time.